I am going to count this as my minor contribution to June on the Range, which is going to be posted too late because it will be July 1st when I'm posting this. But I finished a book called Death in Zion National Park by Randi Minetor, which is an interesting last name, and I think I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but that's kind of how it's spelled. I have not this year been doing really well with going with reading challenges and whatever else. I just sort of rebel from them. And even the summer reading program around here I have not participated in. So I'm just doing what I do, which is read nonfiction right and left. And just kind of what I choose that I'm interested in. And I finished Death in Zion National Park. This is one of there's a large number of books about accidents and things that happen in national parks. I have previously sort of looked at one that was from Great Smoky Mountains. That one was kind of self-published, but there's a whole bunch here that kind of are a series. They kind of... some of them are all very similarly published by the same publisher. Some of them are kind of, will be about certain parks, and then you'll have other ones that are a series from another publisher about other parks. It's kind of interesting. I own several different ones because this sort of thing interests me, and also I go to a lot of national parks, which also sort of, it's kind of, stuff to warn you about and keep in mind when you're going to different national parks about things that you might not think of that are dangerous there. This book is divided into areas where they talk about several, apparently Zion, which is a very big, very well-known park, has several hikes where they go through canyons that have water in them. It seems like the one in particular that they keep going through has an area that, like, flash floods are a possible problem and has caused a number of deaths because either people didn't know that the rain, they weren't warned in time when they started their hike that the rain was coming because of where the canyon is. Apparently the rain happens in other areas and then just flash floods the canyon that you're hiking through, because apparently it's a hike that you then have to wade while you're going through it as well. That one I can see as not necessarily always the people who, they're not, some of these did seem like they had been trying to prepare, and it just ended up happening that these different floods happened and they didn't know. So it's just kind of one of those things that those particular hikes just seem like they're kind of dangerous to do in certain seasons because of the way that the canyon is. Some of the other ones, there were some of the here that they were talking about Angel's Landing, which I have heard of before, and it's supposedly this really extreme kind of hike that you take and you have a really good view at the end, and they've tried to make it safer, but there's been a number of people falling off here. I would never do Angel's Landing based off of pictures I've seen of it. It looks terrifying, and that is not something I'm interested in. Even when I was at the top of Chimney Tops in the Smokies, that people were climbing all over the rocks and the edges, and that I found absolutely terrifying. So I also, from what I've pulled up about Angel's Landing, it's very, very popular. So it's also like you're having to wait in line to go single file at busy seasons to go up this very steep area. Just doesn't seem very safe. Probably is safer than it looks, but it is another one that at a hike I would not do on there. But they mention a lot about that. They mention about falls from different places. They mention one that I believe was a murder that happened there and the situation that happened with that. They mentioned a bunch of situations with one of the tunnels that goes through the park that people, because of the way the tunnel is, you can easily get hit in it, and you can't bicycle through it, and of course a group decided they were going to bicycle through it, and a bunch of them got hit. In there, this also talks about, I think this is the one that talks about the base jumping. Is this the one that mentions the base? Hang on just a second. Yep. This one talks about the base jumping. Base jumping is something that is fairly controversial in national parks because I'm just going to say right here, I am not sympathetic to the base jumpers. And I've heard a lot of arguments on it and people trying to not be judgmental or anything like that about the base jumpers. But the issue is a lot of people who base jump argue about the fact that they need safe places to do the base jumping. They argue that those places should be in national parks. There should be places in the national parks that they can do the base jumping safely and not get arrested and not be having to do all this kind of sneaking around thing that they have to do, which they say makes it even more dangerous. Base jumping, when we're talking about base jumping, we're talking about the jumping off of a fixed point and either wearing a flight suit or setting off your parachute in a very short amount of time. Base jumping is one of those things that, from what I understand, it's if you continue doing it a whole lot, it's not if you're going to have an accident, it's when you're going to have an accident. And that is kind of a big deal because, again, and this is something I mentioned in that other video when I was talking a little bit about the thing about parks and the huge argument that has gone on from the base jumpers about the fact that they should be allowed to do this in a safer way. I'm reminding everyone this is not a necessary thing. This is a hobby for these people. This is something like parachuting or whatever else. And I understand that this is a hobby that they greatly enjoy and really like. It's the same thing about the free climbers and all that. I get it, but it's also perfectly within the rights of the park to deny you to be able to do that and not be happy when you are up there doing that. Mainly because no one wants to clean up your mess. Nobody wants to have to go after and try to rescue you when you get stuck somewhere. Nobody wants to have to clean up your parachute that did not go off when you jumped off of whatever arch you decided you were going to jump off of. And I know that sounds like me being very dismissive of all the subtleties of the arguments on this with different stuff, but I just don't think. I know of one situation where the parachute didn't go off and the hit was so hard it set off car alarms in the area. So we're not talking about, somebody has to go find somebody up on a hill who was frozen or whatever else. We are talking about you are making park people, like people who are just working in a park, come up and have to deal with that. And that to me seems absolutely unhinged, that you would think that is, your argument is, well, it'll if we do it this way it'll be safer. I don't see how that thing is ever safe. You are just on a hobby making it harder on people in a park that you don't have to be there. There's already enough arguments about allowing people to hike certain areas and do certain things in parks and whatever else, and what you are and aren't allowed to do in different places in different ways. And I'm sorry, the base jumping one just does not. And I've heard it argued on a podcast where they were trying to be very fair and, this will be safer and da-da-da-da-da. But I'm just saying the people who work in Zion didn't sign up to be having to monitor base jumping. That some of the parks did try to, one of them I know of, did try to allow it with some rules, and immediately the base jumpers just broke all the rules. Absolutely immediately. I mean, they just absolutely trashed the place, broke the rules completely. You would be amazed what people do in national parks, and I say that being in Great Smokies have recently this year started charging people parking passes that if you're going to park somewhere in the park, you've got to have a parking pass in your car. They used to never do that. This is a new thing this year. I know they've had some kickback on it, but it was getting out of hand. People were just stopping their car and parking in the road. These are one-lane roads. Roaring Fork, some of those are. They were just stopping their cars different. They couldn't quite pull off the road in their massive 12-passenger van, so they just stayed on the road. Kind of, like we got like 2 wheels off, so we're fine. It was that type of thing. It was incredibly dangerous. You were having way too many people being at these certain locations. That wasn't safe. It didn't even feel like nature anymore. So I'm sorry, I do feel like there should be restrictions and rules and whatever else. I believe there was one in here where they were talking about that there were warning signs where these people were, but the teenager ended up falling off of the waterfall or whatever it was up there, even though there had been warnings about, it was, and the family, of course, sued because they were saying, well, there should have been more warnings, and you end up, I believe they lost the case, but you end up, yes, I'm sad that you ended up with a family member dying. I'm sad about that. That is a very tragic thing that happened, but also, you are in a wild place. I've made this argument with the last video where I talked about, I'm just baffled that people seem to think these places have guardrails and are safe. And if there is a warning, well, we're going to ignore the warning, and there should have been more of a warning and a bigger warning and whatever else. So, yeah, that's... these are very good books. This author has written several about them. I would say if you're going to go to any of these parks, they're a good read before you would go, just to be forewarned about some certain things, because I would say people hype up Angel's Landing, people hype up some of these hikes that are like, through the canyon and whatever else, and you need to be aware that there are some really dangerous things with some of this stuff, and take that into account. So, once again, it's turned into me ranting about how people don't respect nature enough, about how dangerous it is, and another book that kind of backs it up a little bit with people just ending up in accidents in some of the wildest ways possible, both by their fault and just that's how nature is. So... very good book that I would recommend you reading, particularly if you're going to Zion at any point.